Hi, so this is the first in the series of videos on essay feedback for your Lenin essay. Apologies if there's a bit of background noise. They're painting the science block at the moment and they're using one of those big cherry picker things, and so you might hear beeping in the background. The first thing you need to do when you're thinking about this question is understand the question. That seems like a really simple, stupid thing to start with, but if you don't understand the question, then there's no way you're going to be able to write a top-level essay. Now, these questions differ. There are lots of different versions of a Cambridge question about Lenin, and Cambridge can ask you about the same sort of content in lots of different ways. So you need to get good at spotting the different kinds of questions, and I will help you with this as the year goes by. You will get plenty of practice at looking at these questions, but that's the first thing to say. There is no right way to answer these questions, and there is no one way to answer these questions because the questions are so different. Let's think about this question then. And I want to talk about 4 key words, because if you didn't understand these 4 key words, or if you overlook the importance of them, then you are not going to have written a very strong essay. So the first thing that you need to know about is the word policies. What is a policy? Well, a policy is a set of actions, or maybe even it's one action, and it's in this context formulated by a government. So it's a government action. Now, lots of things might influence a government's decision to take an action here, but how you write about a policy is important because it makes your essay make more sense. But also, if you get it wrong, if you write about the word policy in the wrong way, then it shows the examiner that you don't really understand what you're talking about. So these are the words that I was looking for. These are the words that I wanted to see in your essay. A policy, when it's at the thought stage, is conceived. There's a metaphor of a living creature being conceived at conception stage. Or once it's born, it might be adopted, it might be made, it might be designed, it might be introduced. That's at the very early stage. Once a policy's already been introduced, then you might say it's practiced, or it's enacted, or again you might say it's introduced. The big mistake I saw in this essay was people talking about policies as if they had a force of their own, as if they were living creatures, as if they were animate, sentient beings. A policy is not a person. A policy is an action. It's put into action, or rather it is enacted by a person or people, but it on its own doesn't have any physical qualities. So if you found yourself writing about a policy as if it was a thing with a pulse or a shape that could be touched or prodded or put in a box, then you've got the wrong idea about a policy. Second word, key word, is determined. Lenin's policies, to what extent were Lenin's policies determined by X rather than Y? So the key phrase here, or the phrase that revolves around this key word, means what were the factors that led Lenin to choose the policies he chose, right? Imagine you're Lenin and you know that you've got a problem and you know that you need a policy in order to solve that problem, and you're sitting at the table trying to figure out what to do. You might have a range of options in front of you. You choose one. Well, what was it that led you to choose that one factor? Sorry, to choose that one option. Why did you choose that one? What determined your decision to choose one policy over another? Think about your understanding of that word when you were writing the essay. Did you think about it in that way? So lots of people talked about these two options, necessity and ideology, as if it was one or the other. There were only 2 options. It had to be either necessity or ideology. If you didn't see it that way, you probably saw it as mainly necessity with a bit of ideology mixed in somehow. Not really sure on how that mix looked, but somehow that was it. Let's move on and talk about the synonyms for determined. So these are the words I was looking for. These are the words I wanted to see in your essay. A policy is decided on the basis of something, some considerations led to the decision to go for one policy rather than another. It's clinched by a decisive factor. So he might have had a range of options, but the decision to go with option A is clinched by something. It might have been settled on. Lenin's policies might have been settled on. In other words, after a discussion, they weighed up the options and they settled on option B. Or it might have been selected. They might have looked at all the options on offer and selected option C from a range. Have a look through your essay and see whether you were talking about policies in these terms. Let's think about necessity then. Necessity is something that is determined by outside factors, isn't it? We are in this COVID-19 lockdown by necessity, right? We wouldn't choose ordinarily to work in this way, but because of this thing which is out of our control, it is necessary to work in this way. So it's required by the circumstances. It's unavoidable. There might be other options available. That phrasing might not be very helpful. There might be other options available, but they're not very good options. They're not very palatable options. We would rather not take those options. It might be essential. It might actually be necessary. It might be essential to choose this in order to avoid some kind of catastrophe. And necessity also implies urgency. It's pressing. There's a threat. There's a danger of not taking a decision sooner rather than later. Again, did you use these words? And finally, ideology. Ideology is not external. So where I said necessity was external, it's something that's out of your control, it's something outside of you. An ideology is not, is it? An ideology is an idea or a set of ideas. In other words, it's in your head. Now, you might have written it down and turned it into a book, but the point is this was an idea that originated inside your brain. So what are the words that you might use? You might use philosophy, theory, principles, beliefs, right? So did you write about ideology in these ways? So action points, there's really only one here. Go back through your essay. Most of you wrote them on the computer, so it's easy just to do a quick Control F, search for these keywords, the ones that I just showed you in colour. How many times do you use the keywords for the question, and how many times do you use good synonyms for those words? In other words, the ones that I showed you on screen. Don't try looking for your own synonyms because often you choose the wrong ones. I'm not trying to be mean or unkind, but my experience as a history teacher shows me over the years that often students choose the wrong synonyms. So have a look. And secondly, I haven't written it on screen here, but this is an option for you as well. Look at where they appear in your essay. Do they appear in the key parts of your essay? And you know from Unit 3 where the key parts are. Key parts are top, middle and bottom of a paragraph and introductions and conclusions. Hope that helps.